Hey everybody, I'm Daisy Luce and I help people build flexible, profitable online tutoring businesses by specializing in high demand niches like me. And SAT tutoring is one of the best subjects out there to tutor. So let's dive right in. Last week I talked about what math is actually on the SAT, and the main point was that you do not need to relearn all of high school math to tutor this test well, especially not pre-cal. In fact, you only have to know Algebra 1 and geometry in order to solve every problem on the math portion of the SAT. Now, I know that's shocking, but today I wanted to go through and show you the next part about the SAT, which is just as important, if not more, and that is that the math part of SAT is not really a math test at all. I know that sounds weird because obviously there is a whole math section, but the test is not asking students to prove they can do every problem the long way by hand, the way they learned in math class. It's asking whether they can get to the right answer fast. The biggest shift you have to make as an SAT tutor is this: you are not teaching math class. You're teaching a test, and those are not the same thing. In math class, the teacher usually cares about the method. They want to see the steps. They want the work shown. They want the student to practice a very specific skill in a specific way. The SAT, though, doesn't care about any of that. The SAT only cares whether the answer is right. So when I say the SAT is not really a math test, what I mean is that it is more of a reasoning or a logic test than anything else. The math is the language it uses, but the real skill is figuring out the fastest way through the problem. So sometimes that means, yes, doing the algebra involved, and sometimes it means plugging in the multiple choice answers or back solving. And now on the digital SAT, it very often means using Desmos, the online graphing calculator. Now, the graphing calculator Desmos is built right into the test, and every student gets it for the whole math section. But most students barely know what to do with it except, just graph a couple things. That is a real opportunity for you as a tutor. So you have to realize, though, your job is not to reteach everything a student has ever learned in math class. Please do not do that to yourself or to the student. You will be tutoring for hours and hours and hours and not make the headway that you need to make when you're tutoring to help students reach their goal. Your job is to look at the student in front of you and ask, what is the easiest way for this kid to get the correct answer? Not the fanciest way, not the most impressive, just the easiest way. And some students are great by hand. That's fantastic if that's their gift. Let them use that and you can coach them up in that direction. But a lot of students really struggle remembering how to do math to this depth if they are going to do it by hand. And they might make a tiny mistake or freeze when the algebra starts looking ugly. And those students, the majority of students, they need another path. Desmos gives them one. This is why SAT tutoring is different, though, from homework help, like subject tutoring as well. When you're subject tutoring for a class in school, you might be helping a student learn the method their teacher wants, showing all of their work, learning not to rely on the calculator. But in SAT tutoring, you're helping them beat the test. That means strategy matters just as much as content. Let me show you what I mean with an actual problem. This is the kind of question that can look much harder than it is. The by hand way, you may already know, is to solve by substitution or linear addition, elimination method. And yes, that works. But there are a lot of steps involved here, and it doesn't even look exactly like what you would have seen in math class, because what are all these constants, the A, B, and C? That rarely happens in math class. But here it is. It's very common on the SAT. I'll work this out by hand using elimination method. If I'm trying to create an infinite number of solutions, I I am trying to get the X and Y both to cancel out simultaneously, and it might look something like this. So in order for there to be an infinite number of solutions, all of these rows would have to be identical. They did not ask me anything about B, so I'm not going to solve for B, although it would be 2. What I am going to do is just set these equal to each other and see if I can arrange them in a way that says A over C. But even that, trying to arrange it in a way A over C, students would not be as familiar with from math class. That's not a skill that we generally teach, to solve for just a generic ratio without ever identifying exactly what the A and the C are, but it can be done. I can divide the C over to this side and the 9 over to this side, and I find out that A over C is 6 over 9, which of course reduces to 2/3. Now, for most students, even students that are really good with the skills from math class, that is going to be an extremely challenging algebra problem. But I want you to watch what happens if we just go to Desmos instead and type it in there. Check this out. It says it's going to add a slider for the constants that it doesn't recognize for when it's not the X or the Y. All you have to do to make that happen is hit enter, and you'll automatically get a slider, which is going to allow us to move the graph around to create what we need to create. But let's type the other equation in next. You can see here it says it's going to add 2 sliders as soon as I hit enter. So I have a lot of different constants and sliders to work with in order to create what I'm trying to create, which is an infinite number of solutions. And when I'm tutoring students and we're working on Desmos, I have helped them draw back from the depths of their memory that an infinite number of solutions means it's the same exact line. And so they know that. And now what we need to do is make that happen. So we start playing around with the sliders, and this really won't take very long. Typically, I am going to zoom in. It looks like 2 is making it parallel, which I kind of like, because remember, infinite means, I'll remind students, infinite means they have to be the same line. So I'm going to keep that 2, and then maybe I can move this around. Now that kind of makes it jumpy. Let me go move C and see if that works any better. Right there. Right there. And if you're unsure if it's really on top of it, you can check it, move it off of it again, and then move it back on. And there it is. Usually these 2 graphs are different colors. You can turn them on and off like that as well. Usually with the 2 different colors, you can see it much easier once they're on top of each other, but they are on top of each other. And so now let's go back to what their question is. The question was simply, what is A divided by C? That's it, just A divided by C. Looking at our sliders, I can see A is 1, C is 1.5. Divide that out, and guess what we get? 2/3. Okay, so much, much easier. I didn't need the student to remember any of the math. I didn't need to get through 5 lines of algebra without losing a negative sign or trying to figure out what I was supposed to even be doing algebraically. I just needed the student to understand what the question was asking, which is that infinite number of solutions makes the same line, and then use Desmos. And I build this into my SAT tutoring where we are practicing Desmos continually. I do back it up with the algebra because again, you have to read your student well and understand what it is that their natural tendencies are and their natural gifts, and I do want to build into those. But for most students, Desmos is going to blow it out of the water and going to be the best way to solve these problems. So what does this mean for you as a tutor? If you're thinking about tutoring the SAT, you do not have to be the kind of math person who can do every SAT problem by hand at lightning speed and you recall every single math concept from all of high school. What you do need is solid fundamentals. You need to know what the test is asking. You need to know the shortcuts well enough to teach them clearly. But that should be a relief because SAT math tutoring is not about proving how much math you know. It's about helping the student get more points. And a lot of the time, the smartest tutoring move is to make the problem simpler than it looks. And just in case you're still feeling nervous about tutoring the SAT, remember, you're in total control of which problems you present during your lesson and which problems you assign for homework. There's no reason you can't be 100% prepared for any question that a student might bring because you assigned all of the problems. SAT tutoring in many ways, I think, is much easier than homework help tutoring. When you tutor for homework, as I already said, you have to be ready in an instant with anything a student might bring you. You have no idea what the teacher assigned ahead of time usually. But SAT tutoring is so different from that since you are the one preparing all of the lessons. Okay, I think I'm running out of time on this video. I have another problem I want to show you, but I'm just going to make it next week's video. Let's come back. Let's do another problem. I'll show you how to do it algebraically by hand, but then I'm going to walk you through how to do it on Desmos as well. So you can see another look at that before we move on to the grammar and the English section coming up this month. We are sticking with SAT for a little while here as we go through and just learn all of these different ideas and techniques that are so valuable as a tutor. If you want the math formula sheet that I showed last week, it is linked below. Right below this video, it has everything that is actually on the SAT math section all on one page. This whole series running all month for the SAT's 100th birthday. So hit subscribe, follow below so you won't miss any of it, and happy tutoring, friend.